The titanous blade pressed against Marcus Chen's throat as Queen Zephyra's mandibles clicked in amusement. Her forearms held him pinned against the observation deck's viewport, the stars beyond casting an eerie glow across her segmented face. "Pathetic mammal," she hissed, her voice a symphony of clicks and whistles translated through the neural interface. "Your species crawls on 2 legs like wounded insects, yet you dare challenge the Dominion's authority." Marcus remained perfectly still, his breathing controlled despite the razor edge drawing a thin line of blood. The diplomatic summit had been a trap from the beginning. 3 human delegates already lay motionless on the polished floor, their security detail overwhelmed by Zephyra's royal guard in seconds. "Your queen sent you here believing in peace," Zephyra continued, her compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "How deliciously naive. The Terran Federation will kneel before the Hive, or burn like the other 73 civilizations we've conquered." The blade pressed deeper. Marcus felt his pulse hammering against the sharp edge, but his expression never changed. Years of diplomatic training in hostile territories had taught him patience. His left hand hung loose at his side, fingers barely twitching as he counted heartbeats. "Nothing to say, Softskin?" The Queen's laughter was like breaking glass. "Perhaps you're finally understanding your place in the natural order. Mammals are prey, insects are predators. This is the way of the universe." Marcus had studied the Zephyran anatomy extensively. Their exoskeletons were nearly impenetrable, but evolution had given them the same vulnerability as their smaller cousins. His fingers found the pressure point just below her secondary thorax, where the nerve cluster controlled motor functions. "I have something to say," Marcus whispered. Before Zephyra could react, his thumb drove into the precise location with surgical accuracy. Her entire left side seized, the blade tumbling from suddenly nerveless claws. In the same motion, Marcus pivoted, his shoulder catching her off balance as his training kicked in. The Queen's confident posture crumbled as she found herself pressed against the viewport, her forearms pinned by leverage and anatomy rather than brute force. Marcus had positioned himself perfectly, using her own segmented joints against her, each limb locked in a hold that would snap bone if she resisted. "Impossible," she gasped, her remaining functional arms scrabbling uselessly against the transparent aluminum. "You're just a weak mammal," Marcus finished quietly. "You're right. We are mammals. We're also the species that survived ice ages, plague, nuclear war, and our own stupidity long enough to reach the stars." The royal guards raised their weapons but hesitated. Any shot would risk hitting their queen through the human's body. Marcus had positioned them both perfectly in their line of fire. "Your species conquered through numbers and venom," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the impossible situation. "We learn to survive through adaptation. Every scar teaches us something new." Zephyra's breathing came in sharp clicks. The human's grip was impossibly precise, each pressure point chosen to maximize control while minimizing permanent damage. She'd expected brutish strength, but this was something else entirely, calculated restraint that was somehow more terrifying than raw violence. "The neural interface works both ways," Marcus said softly. "I've been studying your language, your culture, your biology for 6 months preparing for this summit. Did you know that when a Zephyran queen submits, she releases specific pheromones that compel absolute obedience from her swarm?" The queen's compound eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare." "I don't want to." Marcus's pressure remained constant, but not crushing. "But if those ships surrounding Earth receive the attack order because you can't control your pride, I'll do whatever it takes to protect my people." The observation deck fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support. Through the viewport, both Earth's blue marble and the Zephyron fleet hung suspended in the void, weapons charged and ready. "Your move, Your Majesty," Marcus said. "You can choose to see mammals as more than prey, or you can explain to your Hive Council why their queen was outmaneuvered by a diplomat from a species you consider beneath notice." Zephyra's mandibles trembled with rage, but something else flickered in her compound eyes, emotion she'd never experienced before. For the first time in her life, the apex predator had become prey, held not by superior strength, but by superior knowledge and unshakable resolve. The fate of 2 civilizations balanced on her next words, and the weak mammal who held her life in his hands waited with the patience of a species that had learned to survive anything the universe could throw at them. Marcus felt the queen's pulse racing beneath his fingertips through the neural feedback, her biochemistry a map of fear and fury. The royal guards remained frozen, their particle weapons humming with deadly potential but useless, while their sovereign remained in his precise grip. "You study us like specimens?" Zephyra snarled, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. dissecting our weaknesses with the same cold calculation your species uses to strip mine dead worlds. We study because we survive, Marcus replied, adjusting his hold as she tested his restraint. Your hive conquered the Altarian Republic in 6 days. The crystalline hegemony lasted 2 weeks. The Void Swimmers held out for a month before their homeworld burned. Each civilization's name hit like a physical blow. The Queen had personally overseen those campaigns, watched entire species reduced to ash in memory. The humans somehow knew intimate details of battles fought light years away. But humans are different, Marcus continued. We've had practice being prey. For most of our evolution, everything with claws or fangs wanted to eat us. We learned to think faster than we could run. The Queen's secondary arms tried to find leverage, but Marcus anticipated every movement. His positioning wasn't accidental. Every angle calculated to maintain control while the neural interface fed him constant updates on her physiological state. The first rule of human survival, he said quietly, is that there's always a way out. We just have to be smart enough to find it. Through the viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel surrounded by a constellation of Zephyron dreadnoughts. Each ship carried enough firepower to glass continents, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had burned 73 civilizations to cinders. Your fleet commanders are waiting for your signal, Marcus observed. How long before they assume something's gone wrong? Long enough. But uncertainty crept into Zephyra's voice. The human's calm was unnerving, his breathing steady while holding a creature twice his mass in a submission hold that should have been impossible. I've read your historical records, Marcus said. The queens who founded the Dominion didn't conquer through blind aggression. They adapted, learned from their enemies, incorporated their strengths. When did your species forget that wisdom? The question struck deeper than any physical attack. Zephyra remembered the old stories, the legendary queens who had built an empire through cunning rather than just overwhelming force. But those were ancient tales, from before the hive had grown drunk on easy victories. 73 species, she whispered. All inferior. All weak. All underestimated. Marcus's grip remained steady. The Altarians were master strategists until you learned their patterns. The crystalline hegemony had perfect defensive formations until you found their blind spots. The Void Swimmers could bend space itself until you adapted your tactics. Each word was precisely chosen, delivered with the same calculated pressure as his physical hold. He was dissecting her assumptions with surgical precision, the way his species had learned to dissect every threat they'd ever faced. What makes you think humans will be any different? Zephyra demanded, though her voice carried less conviction than before. Because we've been studying you for 74 conquests, Marcus said simply. We've watched you adapt to every enemy, seen the patterns in your tactics. While you were celebrating victories, we were learning from every species you destroyed. The neural interface suddenly flooded with new data. Tactical analyses, behavioral profiles, technical specifications that shouldn't have been accessible to any non-Zephyran consciousness. The human had somehow accessed restricted hive databases through their connection. Impossible, the Queen breathed. Those files are genetically locked. Your own neural interface opened the door, Marcus explained. Human DNA is remarkably adaptable. 6 months of preparation included some minor modifications to my genetic markers. The hive recognizes me as a Queen-class intelligence. The revelation hit like a physical blow. The human hadn't just studied Zephyran biology. He'd temporarily altered himself to exploit it. The casual mention of genetic modification spoke to a technological sophistication the hive hadn't anticipated. You're bluffing, Zephyra hissed, but her certainty was cracking. No species has ever successfully integrated with hive biotechnology. Check your medical scanners, Marcus suggested. The Queen's enhanced senses, designed to monitor the biological status of her subjects, suddenly registered the human differently. His modified genetic signature pulsed with artificial markers that mimicked Zephyran royal DNA, each sequence crafted with impossible precision. Now you understand, Marcus said as the full implications sank in. This isn't just first contact, Your Majesty. This is humanity's application to join the galactic community, with or without the hive's permission. The Queen's confidence had evaporated completely. The weak mammal holding her wasn't just surviving. He was demonstrating capabilities that redefined everything she thought she knew about human limitations. For the first time in her reign, Zephyra faced an opponent who had outthought her completely. Through the viewport, the stars waited in silent judgment as two civilizations balanced on the edge of war or transformation. The neural interface blazed with cascading data as Marcus downloaded tactical files that represented millennia of Zephyran military evolution. Fleet formations, weapon specifications, defensive protocols, the accumulated knowledge of 73 conquered civilizations flowed through the connection like water through a broken dam. "Stop!" Zafira commanded, but her voice carried no authority. The human's modified genetic markers granted him access to databases that should have been impossible to breach. "You're violating sacred hive protocols." "I'm learning," Marcus corrected, his tone remaining conversational despite the earth-shaking intelligence coup occurring through their neural link. "Your species made adaptation in art form. I'm simply following your example." The Queen's struggles grew more desperate as she felt her own tactical knowledge being analyzed, categorized, and absorbed by a mind that processed information in ways the hive had never encountered. Human neural architecture was different. Chaotic where Zephyrin thought was ordered, intuitive where theirs was logical. "The Hive Council will execute you for this," she threatened, though they both knew her position was deteriorating by the second. "No queen has ever suffered such humiliation." "No queen has ever faced humans before," Marcus replied. Through the neural link, he sensed her growing confusion as his altered genetics triggered responses her biology wasn't designed to handle. The Hive's own adaptation mechanisms were turning against them. Outside the observation deck, the Royal Guards received new orders through their genetic communication network. But the signals were corrupted, filtered through a queen whose biochemical responses no longer followed familiar patterns. Their formation wavered as contradictory impulses flooded their collective consciousness. "Your pheromone output is changing," Marcus observed clinically. "The neural interface is creating feedback loops your system isn't equipped to process. Your guards are receiving mixed signals." Zafira's mandibles clicked in alarm as she felt control of her own biology slipping away. The human's presence in her neural pathways was like a virus, reprogramming responses that had been hard-coded through millions of years of evolution. "What do you want?" she gasped, finally abandoning pretense. The diplomatic mask had crumbled completely, revealing the desperate fear beneath. "Understanding?" Marcus said simply. "Your species conquered through fear and overwhelming force. Ours survived through cooperation and adaptation. Perhaps it's time both civilizations learned from each other." The neural connection suddenly shifted, and Zafira found herself experiencing human memories, not through data transfer, but through direct emotional resonance. She saw Earth not as a blue target to be conquered, but as a living world teeming with diversity, creativity, and stubborn resilience. Images flooded her consciousness. Humans rebuilding after natural disasters, scientists from different nations collaborating on impossible projects, children of former enemies playing together without understanding historical hatred. It was chaos compared to hive unity, but it was also something the Dominion had never possessed. "Innovation," Marcus whispered, and the word carried layers of meaning through their connection. "Your species perfected what already worked. Ours specialized in making impossible things possible." Through the viewport, Earth's Terminator line crept across continents where billions of humans slept, worked, loved, and dreamed without knowing their fate hung in the balance. But Marcus carried their collective memory in his modified neurons. Every scientific breakthrough, every act of courage, every moment when his species had chosen hope over despair. "The Hive believes strength comes from unity," he continued. "But what if strength could come from diversity? What if 74 civilizations didn't have to mean 74 conquest records?" The Queen's compound eyes reflected a new kind of light as alien concepts took root in her consciousness. The neural interface was designed for communication, but Marcus had turned it into something unprecedented, a bridge between incompatible ways of thinking. "Your fleet could glass Earth," he acknowledged, his physical hold remaining steady while his mental grip tightened. "But you'd be destroying something you've never encountered before. A species that grows stronger through conflict rather than weaker." The truth of his words resonated through shared memory as Zafira experienced human history compressed into heartbeats. War, plague, extinction-level disasters. Each catastrophe had triggered not collapse, but evolution. Humanity's greatest advances had come from their darkest moments. "Impossible," she whispered, but the evidence overwhelmed denial. Through the neural link, she felt the weight of human potential like a star preparing to go nova. 26 billion humans on Earth alone, Marcus said quietly. Each one carrying genetic modifications that took our best scientists 6 months to develop for just me. What do you think we've been preparing while your fleets were conquering easier targets? The implications hit with devastating clarity. If this single human could breach hive security and override royal biology, what could an entire civilization of modified humans accomplish? Zafira finally understood why the weak mammal seemed so calm. He wasn't negotiating from weakness. He was revealing strength that made her fleet's firepower irrelevant. The neural interface pulsed with final data transfers as Marcus completed his unprecedented infiltration of Zephyran consciousness. Queen Zephyra felt her worldview rebuilding itself around concepts that shouldn't have been able to coexist: unity through diversity, strength through adaptation, conquest through adaptation. "Choose," Marcus said, his modified genetics triggering cascading changes in her biochemical responses. "Order your fleet to withdraw and open genuine diplomatic channels, or explain to your Hive Council why their greatest queen was outmaneuvered by a species she never bothered to understand." The queen's mandibles trembled as contradictory impulses warred within her altered neural pathways. Through the viewport, both civilizations waited for her decision, poised between war and transformation. "You've changed me," she whispered, the admission carrying weight that transcended physical submission. "The neural modifications are permanent. I can feel human thought patterns integrating with Hive consciousness." "Evolution," Marcus confirmed. "The same process that made your species apex predators. But this time, both our civilizations can benefit from the adaptation." The Royal Guard's weapons powered down as their queen's pheromone output shifted to patterns they'd never encountered. Signals that spoke of curiosity rather than conquest, negotiation rather than domination. Their genetically programmed responses couldn't interpret commands filtered through human neural architecture. "The Hive Council will see this as contamination," Zephyra said, though her voice carried wonder alongside fear. "Queens aren't supposed to be influenced by inferior species." "Superior or inferior are just perspectives," Marcus replied. "Your ancestors understood that wisdom comes from studying enemies, not dismissing them. Perhaps it's time the Dominion remembered those lessons." Through their connection, the Queen experienced human scientific method, the systematic testing of assumptions, the willingness to be proven wrong, the way failure became fuel for innovation rather than cause for despair. It was antithetical to Hive doctrine, yet undeniably effective. "My fleet commanders are requesting status updates," she noted, compound eyes tracking data flows only she could perceive. "How long do you intend to maintain this position?" "Until you understand what humanity offers," Marcus said simply. "We've survived everything this universe could throw at us through one simple principle: we never stop learning." The neural interface suddenly flooded with collective human knowledge, not just tactical data, but art, music, literature, philosophy, the accumulated wisdom of a species that had clawed its way from prey animals to starfaring civilization through pure stubborn determination. Zephyra's consciousness expanded beyond anything she'd thought possible. The rigid hierarchy of Hive thought gave way to chaotic networks of interconnected ideas, each insight building on others in patterns that defied traditional logic. "This is impossible," she breathed, though her tone had shifted from denial to awe. "No single mind should be able to process this much information. Human minds specialize in processing impossible amounts of information," Marcus explained. "We call it imagination. Every scientific breakthrough started as someone wondering what if, rather than accepting what is." The Queen felt her genetic programming struggling to categorize experiences that fell outside every evolutionary parameter. The human wasn't just demonstrating technological capability. He was revealing an entirely different way of understanding reality. "Your proposal," she said finally, her voice carrying new harmonics as modified neural pathways created unprecedented thought patterns. "Genuine diplomatic relations between the Hive and the Federation. What would such an arrangement entail?" "Cultural exchange," Marcus replied. "Scientific cooperation. The chance for both species to learn from each other without conquest or submission." Through the viewport, Earth continued its ancient rotation while Zephyran dreadnoughts held position around humanity's homeworld. But the balance of power had fundamentally shifted through the connection between two minds that should never have been able to communicate. "I am Queen of the Zephyran Dominion," she said, though the title carried new meaning filtered through human concepts of leadership. "I command fleets that have conquered 73 civilizations, yet you hold me with knowledge rather than force." "Because knowledge is the only weapon that makes enemies into allies," Marcus answered. The Queen's decision crystallized with the clarity of a star being born. Her pheromone output shifted to frequencies that commanded absolute attention throughout the Hive fleet, but the message carried unprecedented content. "Fleet Command," she spoke through the neural network that connected every Zephyron consciousness, "power down weapon systems and assume diplomatic formation. We have encountered something worth preserving." Across the void, massive dreadnoughts that had burned 73 worlds slowly withdrew their targeting locks from Earth. The weak mammal had accomplished what no military force in galactic history had managed. He had changed the mind of a Zephyrin queen through the simple act of showing her a better way. Marcus finally released his hold, stepping back as Queen Zephyra straightened with dignity intact but perspective transformed. The neural interface remained active, maintaining the bridge between consciousness that had redefined first contact. "This is only the beginning," she said, compound eyes reflecting starlight and possibility. "Both our species have much to learn." "Then let's learn together," Marcus replied, extending his hand in humanity's oldest gesture of peaceful greeting. The Queen's chitinous fingers touched human flesh for the first time without violence, and two civilizations began writing a new chapter in galactic history.